Welcome back to the workshop, guys. Today I am taking a version of Brian Brazil's horse head that's hand forged, and I'm adding it to a horseshoe. Now, this specific horseshoe came from an individual that this is going to be a gift for, kind of some nostalgia of taking the shoe that was used and turning it into a horse pick. Now, the horse pick tool itself is basically something that allows the horseman or horsewoman to dig some of the rocks, dirt, thorns, any of that kind of stuff that can build up in the base of the foot of the horse that can cause them pain or infection over time. So the first thing I do when I'm getting going here is I'm just straightening this out. One of these is going to be the handle and the horse head on one end, and the other is going to be articulated into a pick itself. And the way that we do this is we bend it in about technically 3 to 4 ways. So I'm going to over straighten, basically over correct the natural curve of the horseshoe. And once I get it over corrected, it creates almost like a straight to a curve right. And once I get that set up, then I'm going to be curving it back. But the first thing that I do when I'm getting going here for the horse head is I'm marking out basically a rule of 3 lines where the bottom of the lips are going to be for the formation of the mouth. I'm marking out where the elongation of the jawline is, and then back to the actual jowls or more of the cheekbone for the horse at the farther back base. Lining these 3 lines up and getting them kind of semi-startened in a not all the way cold but semi-cold state allows you to hit nice, easy, and slow and put indentation marks into the horseshoe itself. And then once you have that set and you heat it back up, you don't have to try and look for your marked lines from chalk because they can wear out depending on how hot you heat this steel. And because this is a harder steel, I'm going to heat it up about as high as I can get it so that those first few hammer strikes really do a lot of work in the formation of the jaw. All right, now these strikes are really important, and it's actually just as important to make sure that you're on the right position of the anvil. The first strikes that you want to do, I made a mistake here, is using the anvil side closest to you to form the first 2/3 of the area of a straightened notch. And what you're doing is from the tip back to the third portion, which I believe was about 7/8 of an inch on this horseshoe, allows a notch to be started at the base of where the jawbone or the jowls are going to be on the horse head itself. Then you move to the front and you create an angle from the base of the nose and the lips using the opposite side of the anvil from you. And then you go ahead and you'll see me tilting the horseshoe left and right. And what I'm doing is I am hammering in and softening some of those edges and creating visible facets. So if you watch the Brian Brazil video, which I will include at the bottom, you're going to need to focus in on what you are trying to achieve, matching the instruction that Brian uses in his video. And what I mean by that is very closely paying attention. And when I mean very closely paying attention, each one of his strikes has a purpose. Whether he is softening edges or creating more illusions in the reflection from angles in the steel or the facets, there's a purpose to each one of those strikes. Some are straightening strikes just to make sure that the steel is in a consistent, even placement in the face of the anvil, so that when he quote-unquote displaces the steel, and the word displace means that you are striking the hammer against the steel to move the steel in a specific way. It's almost like moving clay, and Brian Brazil also has a great video about forging using a piece of clay to show how once you strike in one spot, material moves to a different area. That's very important. So what I'm doing here now is I took a railroad spike itself and I cut just the very tip off and I hammered it into, you know, kind of a conical shape. And then I drilled out the center, and then I ground around the edges. And what I was trying to achieve is something that was strong enough that would also create a good looking eye. I think the eye and the drill bit that I used on my practice steel was perhaps too large for this specific horseshoe, because I practiced a few times before this. But as you need a tool, obviously you make a tool, and having the eye shaped the right way and having, you know, almost like the oval shape instead of just a standard circle shows up a lot more artistically in the visual representation of the eye marks. If you don't do things like this and design specific tools, then a lot of the markings or the carvings that you're using by making cuts end up looking like a gargoyle. So this is my personal stamp. I get to use it sometimes more in blacksmithing than I do in knives, because my knives can end up getting bent from using my tool. And if you're doing a very specific piece of Damascus or a long knife, it's kind of hard to make sure that you straighten that back out after the deformation of the stamp. But you know, it's still an awesome thing to be able to put your name on a piece of steel. And then I'm just wire brushing things, getting things cleaned up, taking a look back over the cuts and the angles that I made. You know, the indentations, I used a round punch for the nose, so that I could then pin a individual small diamond punch into the nostril end, and just a basic railroad spike to cut in the mouth and tamp in the ear, and basically where you would see the mane on the horse, those 4 strikes up towards where you put in the spike nails or the tack nails into the horseshoe itself, allows some more visible area that I'm going to eventually find is going to be best to put a leather wrap on. So through that kind of time lapse, you saw that I was doing some bending and forming of the hook and trying to get it right. And then I wrapped the leather through the other tack nail holes in the handle portion. And now I'm putting just some brass and nickel accents and peening them into the leftover holes on top. And this is what the piece looks like. Again, I'll include Brian's video in the bottom. Let me know what you think. Thanks, guys.